Okay, we're going to talk about wisdom. And since it's Epiphany, I'll use as a model the wise men and what actually made them wise. Let's look at it that way. Wisdom is sort of an elusive property. Henry David Thoreau said that for every truly virtuous person, there are 999 people of virtue. You get that? See, I contend that for every wise person, there are about 999 people who are clever, but not wise. Now, what constitutes wisdom, to start out with, is the ability to compile a lot of information and experience that one has in life. Having a sense of openness, sort of being a sponge. It's more than the accumulation of knowledge. And it's not something you acquire through education. See, unfortunately, education, especially in the United States, has been reduced to telling you how to make a living. You acquire certain skills and certain knowledge, and it's in a fairly narrow thing. You know, you'll learn how to juggle figures, you'll learn how to do this, that, or the other sort of thing. And, you know, it helps you make a living, but it doesn't help you live life. Right? Now, in Western culture, that's pretty much the norm. In Eastern culture and in Eastern religion, you know, the fundamental emphasis is upon enlightenment, which of course is what the season of Epiphany is all about. And enlightenment puts the burden of discovery upon the individual. You know, by meditation, searching, seeking, one becomes enlightened. If you become enlightened enough and you become wise enough and you accumulate enough knowledge about life and other people, then you sort of become part of a plateau, an elite plateau of people who are in harmony with the purpose of the divine. Okay? That's how you get to nirvana or whatever. Okay? Now, I happen to find that, you know, the fact that all the industry in this is our fault, well, that part of it I have a problem with. But the concept, I think, is marvelous. See? I think it's far better than the sort of laziness that's a part of Western religious belief, in that if you come in here and sit down through the process of osmosis, you're somehow going to assimilate something that's going to make you a better person. Well, yeah, but you have to think about it, right? And you have to be able to relate it to what life is about or to the experience. Okay. T.S. Eliot made a great statement about knowledge. Our knowledge brings us closer to our ignorance. Our ignorance brings us closer to God, to death. Death, not necessarily closer to God. Whatever happened to the life lived and now lost? See, you go through life and you didn't glean anything from it. You didn't garner any wisdom from it at all. You accumulate a whole lot of knowledge and all of a sudden, doesn't serve anybody or you very well. Now, what's the first thing we know about the wise men? Well, they, as Rich preached a couple of weeks ago, were a diverse group of people. Now, if they're real or myth doesn't make any difference. The fact of the matter is that the symbolism of them is just absolutely replete with all kinds of information. You know, one of them's black. When you see great art of them, one of them is always bowing, presenting a gift. Oh. There's a sense of reverence here. They come from various parts of the world. There's a universality. Different people on the same mission for the same purpose, to worship. They didn't come to interview this kid. They came there to worship this kid. All right. And they're seekers, searchers. They've seen a dim light. Okay, in magnitude compared to the rest of the stars, it's brighter, but it's a dim light. It isn't the moon or the sun. Okay. That must be what we're looking for. So they go way out of their way to find what? This child. Why? Well, why is the key word here. Why is a religious question. As I've said here time and time before, well, the how questions of life are easier to answer. Science, mathematics, whatever can tell you how things are made, how things happen. You can even take apart the atom. How? Say, but why is there an atom? Well, that's a whole different question. See, that's a religious question. That's a metaphysical question. That's a question that points to something that has a creative power and genius that we don't understand. It also opens our eyes and minds to the idea that there are certain truths in life you're never going to understand. Part of wisdom. Well, Herod wanted to know where this kid was, but for an entirely different reason. He doesn't want to worship him, he wants to kill him. Why? Because he's a threat to me. Well, there's a traditional kind of power-hungry kind of way of looking at things. That's a worldly way of looking at things. Now, you can accuse Herod of a lot of things, but you'll never be able to have somebody tell you he was a wise person. Well, so these people are seekers. They're open to possibilities. They've been paying attention to things throughout their lives. This isn't a momentary revelation to these people. Somehow they came to the conclusion that there's this sign that's going to happen. And if you follow the sign, it's going to take you to something of a higher purpose. Now, I digress and be personal here for a minute. There aren't a whole lot of people walking around this planet who have more years of education than I do. I understand that. I can't think of much of anything I ever learned in any school I ever went to that actually helped me live life or actually helped me do the job I do. Okay. But it is great to appear to be smart at cocktail parties and stuff like that. So consequently, it does have some value to it, right? But the fact of the matter is that I was 7 when I started first grade. And I had lived this sort of bucolic, idyllic, separated life. I was a miniature adult. See, I never had any friends who were my own age until I was like 7 and got thrust into first grade. And the first thing I learned about kids my own age is they're nasty, they lie, they'll stab you in the back. And my education to wisdom started immediately. Right? Now that has helped me immensely through the rest of my life. Okay. I learned that if you don't live up to other people's expectations, they have a terrible habit of playing the blame game. Right? See, I never lived as a kid up to anybody's expectations of me. Okay? So something's got to be wrong. Either I'm not wired properly or, my parents are lacking, but nothing could possibly ever be wrong with the educational system. So all of a sudden, I start becoming wise at a very young age. It stuck. Okay? Through the peculiarities of my life, I have had to do a whole bunch of different things. Fortunately, I was able to do them. As a truck driver for Federal Express, I learned why people who are blue-collar workers hate the man. But then, most people aren't like me, so the supervisors never asked me too many questions. Why? Because I would say to them, I tell you what you do. You take that would-be genius with an Ivy League MBA who's working in Memphis, Tennessee, and you put him in my truck that doesn't have windshield wipers and have him drive around the Beltway in a snowstorm at rush hour and see how much he likes it and see if he makes his schedule. Touché. Well, it's true. Okay. I learned when I was from 13 to maybe 35, when I used to schmooze with all kinds of extraordinarily fancy and important people, that people who have everything will do anything to preserve the status quo. Why not? My life is perfect. And fundamentally, I don't give a damn about your life. Those are all wise lessons I learned. Eventually, my wisdom caught up with me, and I said, I don't like these people. And of course, the other thing I've told you about these people before is if you want to swagger with them, you got to be just like them. You can't be a part of the party if you rock a boat. So we separate our ways. Okay? And I end up in the same tweed jacket here preaching the good news. Okay, well, life has its twists and turns, So, as it turns out, wisdom is something, it has this unusual component. Wisdom all of a sudden becomes the ability to put yourself in somebody else's place. And when you can do that, when you can empathize, it opens up a whole plethora of possibilities. As I just shared with you, those aspects from a couple of the extremes of my life. So all of a sudden, you can exhibit compassion. The wise men followed a dim light to a distant land on a bet they were going to find the answer to one of life's great eternal questions. Okay? Why has God come into this world? Well, they find out that he came here to save it, and they know that. Why? Because of the symbolism of what they bring. Gold, the symbol of kingship. Myrrh, what you use to embalm somebody when they die. It does a pretty good job. You can go look at King Tut, and for being 3,500 years old, he looks pretty good, right? And then, of course, there's frankincense, which is like this sweet aroma. The sweetness of this child, the love of God being spelled into the world. Well, that's pretty cool. Right? The story takes on new heights and new importance, because the symbolism in it represents the entire life of Christ, not just this nativity thing. They come because they want to bow down. They want to worship. This may be a baby, but it's God, and they know that. There's a little statement about light, the season of light, enlightenment. Bright light blinds the eye. Half light darkens the edges of things. Darkness challenges the eye. The challenge of being wise, with its willingness to assimilate, accept, be a sponge, have compassion, learn of other people, care about everybody else, be able to emote a sense of love in return, is that it's reflected in the fact that, like the wise men in that darkness, were able through their wisdom to achieve that almost cat-like ability to be able to see in the dark. And when you learn how to see in the dark, you overcome all this nonsense of what we're living with in the world today. I done a lot of things. I used to be on the other side of every argument about the Vietnam War when I was a teenager with all my super rich friends and their parents and all their parents' friends. See, I remember getting into verbal battles with people in the Union League Club, but the fact of the matter is, some things are right and some things are just dead wrong. Herod, for all of his power and for all of his pomp, he wasn't wise. He was a fool. You understand where I'm going with this? See, having authority doesn't make it wise. We actually live in a country that's run by a ship of fools. And one of the things that the highest sense of folly about it is the total reckless, wanton, and willful disregard for the well-being of everybody else. That's the most unimaginably ungodlike thing I can think of. To live your whole life around, I want, and to render valueless everything and everybody else. You know what? The differences between people really don't make a damn bit of difference, because the things of significance are the things that we're all similar in. See, even my super rich friends, when they got cancer, they died. When they got close to being dead, they changed their tune. There is a common battlefield that all of us have to deal with. Remember what T.S. Eliot said? In death, we're not necessarily closer to God. But what you don't want to have said about you at the end of things is what that last line is. Whatever happened to all the life that we lived and is now gone. That's the place you don't want to be. Here's to a new generation and a new day of people who learn to see like a cat, and in the darkness find peace, find love, find compassion, exhibit wisdom, and say folly has no place here. That's my fervent prayer. Because I, for one, I must confess, am just damn sick and tired of being told what to do by a fool.